Hello and welcome everyone to the March APQC Knowledge Management webinar, where today we're going to be talking about the essentials of knowledge transfer. So hopefully you're ready for a wonderful conversation today on a very important topic. And therefore, I am joined today by two of my colleagues. But first, I am Lynda Braksiek, and I'm the Principal Research Lead for Knowledge Management here at APQC. I've got Darcy Lemons, one of our senior consultants in knowledge management, and Cindy Hubert, who I'm sure everyone knows, our wonderful APQC fellow in knowledge management as well. So between the three of us today, we hope to get all of your questions answered and hopefully really get a good start on such a very important topic today. I want to mention Lauren Hayes, who's not showing her face right now, but she is our wonderful KM research manager and helps to ensure that these webinars are always done wonderfully on time. The technology works and we're able to have make sure everybody has a wonderful experience. So thank you, Lauren, for your help today as well. Okay, so to get us started, I want to remind us all that this will be recorded, as you heard when you started. We send you the slides and the recording within about 48 hours after the webinar, if you're in person or if you signed up to get a copy of this webinar. But we also put those resources and a deeper dive summary article in the next few weeks in our resource library, so you can access it in the future as well if you'd like, or share it with others. Today, I'm going to share just a couple of upcoming APQC opportunities. I like to keep you in the know. Also, then we're going to dig into the topic of knowledge transfer, where we're going to talk about why it's important to prioritize it in the first place, what it's like to select the right approach, which is one of the biggest questions that we get at APQC. And finally, close with some proven practices to maybe help you get started and think about how you might approach it within your organization. And as always, at the end of this presentation, we like to provide you with a lot of resources. So there's links to other resources related to this topic and more knowledge management topics that you can find and access through apqc.org. So we hope that you take a look at some of those at the end as well. So to get us started, really excited. 4 weeks, I think, from today is day one of our upcoming 2025 conference in Houston, Texas. So if you don't have a ticket yet, there is still time to get one. And this is our favorite time of the year because we love to be able to interact with people like yourselves in person in Houston, having wonderful conversations. We have 2 days of training where we still have a few seats left, and then we have the conference on April 9th and 10th. So go sign up if you haven't yet. And if you aren't able to make it in May, in one of our upcoming webinars, we're going to actually talk about we're going to wrap up and talk about some of the insights from the conference and maybe hear from some of the conference goers as well. So if you're not able to make it, we want to make sure you still get to hear what's going on. So we also have a couple more webinars coming up in June and July on some really good topics. Future Ready KM. Let's talk about what it looks like to work in the field of KM in the future and what those skill sets look like. Now, the next big thing I think is in 2 weeks' time, we're going to have a roundtable discussion. Now, this is for members only, and this is related to the topic we're talking about today. So if you want to go deeper into the topic of knowledge transfer, sign up for that roundtable where we will actually have a chance to hear from other members on the call about some of the practices they have in place, talk about some of the challenges, and hopefully provide some guidance on how to move forward with the challenge of knowledge transfer. And then finally, I just want to mention that we do have our knowledge manager and knowledge transfer specialist certification courses, and they're amazing. Cindy and Darcy teach all of those courses, and we've got 2 under our belt now for knowledge transfer, and they're going extremely well. So if you're interested in digging even deeper into this topic of knowledge transfer, make sure you check that out. So really excited for upcoming opportunities at APQC, and we hope to see you there in one of them. Okay, now let's dig into the topic of today. Let's talk about prioritizing knowledge transfer. So as always, I'm going to start with a little bit of research to tell you why we're even talking about this. The topic of knowledge transfer has shown up on our priorities in one or more ways for several years in a row, and this year is no different. 2025, transferring expert knowledge in particular has shown up as the number 3, and I believe it was number 3 last year as well. This is that really tough. We've got people retiring. We've got people moving jobs. We've had a merger and acquisition. We got to get information from one person to another. How do we do that? And we've got new tools now, generative AI and AI capabilities that can help us. How do we do that? How do we get a handle on all of these things that we're doing and ensure that knowledge transfer is actually happening? And before I dig even deeper into that's the why behind it. But I also like to level set. What do we mean when we say knowledge transfer? So we're going to help you understand a little bit about what that means before we dig into how you do it. I want to make sure we're all speaking the same language. So definition, knowledge transfer is the process of converting the knowledge inside people's heads into content, learning materials, tools, processes that other people can use. It's also about the direct transfer from one person to another, right? It's that conversation you have with another expert, with a colleague, as a mentee, as a mentor, an instructor, and a student, right? It's all of those things as well. How are we making sure that the transfer is actually happening? And when I say transfer, I mean it's not just sent, but it's also received. I understand, I know how to apply it in a new way. So we're going to really hone in on some of that. Now, before we dig in a little deeper, I'm going to raise you up a little bit first because we always have these broad forces influencing us in the organization. And we want to make sure that we're always reminded there's a lot going on in people's lives, in organizations. And so learning to understand where people are at when you're doing knowledge transfer is really important. So we talked about these broad forces in our priorities webinar last month, if you were there. So I'm not going to dig into them deeply, but I just want us to be thinking about the things that are going on in people's heads as we're trying to ask them to do things like work with others to transfer, to capture and elicit and transfer knowledge from one another. You've got data privacy and sustainability going on. AI has really brought that front and center, right? What are we thinking about from a data privacy, security? How are we going to be able to sustain our data centers for all of the activities that we need to do from an AI perspective? We've also, go ahead, Cindy, were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, okay. I saw you go off mute. I thought maybe you wanted to add something in there. Sorry. We also have impacts to organizational culture. So culture shift, leadership changes that can cause cultural shifts. Mergers and acquisitions can happen. Products can move from one place to another and cause a different environment to take place. You can take on new products. There's a lot of things that can happen that are impacting our organizational culture every day. And it's just really a good idea to keep those things in mind because it impacts how we feel at work every day. It impacts how we show up. And we've got lots of generations in the workforce right now, too. What does that look like to transfer from a baby boomer to a Gen Zer or vice versa, right? How do we ensure that that knowledge transfer is happening? Always have the social and global issues going on. Sometimes it impacts us personally. Sometimes it can be we're a global company and we've got to be respectful of what's happening maybe in another country or another culture at this point in time. How does that impact when we're trying to make sure that we're asking people to do knowledge transfer? It's just things we need to really keep in mind because we're humans and we're impacted by these decisions around the world every day from a personal and an organizational perspective. And then finally, think about that pace of technology advancements. And I don't think this one's ever going to leave our list now going forward. It's moving and shaking, and we've got these challenges, but they're exciting challenges at the same time. The cool thing about AI is that a lot of people are embracing it now about what it can do to help them be more effective, but it still moves quickly. How do we stay up on this? And what does that mean to knowledge transfer, right? What does that mean? How do we choose tools and know they're going to survive the test of time? How do we ensure people are comfortable using tools that we leverage for knowledge transfer? So, just like the internet of the 90s or enterprise search in the early 2000s or the move to the cloud, right? We've always got these big technology changes happening, but it's pretty exponential right now. So just want to keep those things in mind. So with that, trying to set the stage a little bit, I'm going to let Cindy dig a little bit deeper into what we mean when we say knowledge transfer.
Thanks, Lynda. It's also overwhelming, right? I guess to just put Lynda's whole slide in context, stuff happens, right? And so, I think there's no better framework to look at than our knowledge flow process framework to really dig into transfer. One thing you might notice is that the word transfer isn't even mentioned in those 7 steps in the middle. Did that disturb me a little bit? It did. You know, you forget more than you remember, and it takes people prompting to help you remember. When Lynda started sharing with me that the transfer of expert knowledge had been on our top 3 list for the last 10 plus years, I thought, maybe we need to go back to what we know about transfer. So we did, a couple of years ago, started this whole effort around, well, how does transfer really work? And I think the most important thing to think about in the terms of transfer is it's where we as knowledge managers can get as close to use as possible. It doesn't mean that transfer is a little pie shape between access and use, because what we're finding as we really dig in and intentionally think about this topic, transfer can happen all along the wheel at any point in time. We have thousands upon thousands of examples of where people are most open to learning. And that's where I think the dynamic comes, the notion of explicit and tacit knowledge being at the sort of crossroads of where learning happens is really important. And this is what got us thinking about, you know, just how does transfer happen? And I think you have to, as I said, any step, it gets us closer to use. And I'm just challenging us as knowledge managers or learning professionals, human resource professionals, organizational excellence, process improvement, quality, any discipline that you're there in helping people improve, get better, make it easier. I think we have to think about this notion of transfer and learning and how they're compatible. The cool thing about thinking about it as a step, it's a lot of things, right? It can be something that I actually do. I transfer knowledge to Lynda, and because that we have some similar experiences, do some common things, it may be easier for her to absorb that than someone else who may just be coming on APQC staff. And so you have to think about the human and the cultural dynamic as part of this as well, because transfer is really, it's a strategy, it's an approach. It's why we coined the transfer of best practices approach and category years ago, because you can encapsulate knowledge in a practice, and it makes it a little bit more tangible for my process people. It makes it a little bit more systematic, and you can actually start the capture. But transfer can happen anywhere, and it really starts with that socialization, that tacit to tacit. We may be in project rotations doing something together, in a mentoring, but where we're sharing and learning from each other, that tacit to tacit, that conversation. And what we're trying to do as KMers, and I think we've done a pretty good job, is we're trying to take that tacit knowledge and grab it through elicitation, the conversations that we have, communities, that whole notion of sharing. Well, transfer starts happening there when we start sharing things and people begin to externalize what they know. It's why we like conversations, right, Lynda and Darcy? Because it gets it out there. And from there, we then, and this is where I think probably KM has spent more money on capturing, organizing it, reviewing it, making sure it's right, putting it in databases, putting it in process, whatever. We spent an exorbitant amount of money trying to encapsulate that, because organizationally, we want that memory to stay with us. And then let's take it one more step. We've done all of that. We've socialized it between people. We've made it external to more people, lunch and learns. We've brought it in-house. We've tried to capture it. And now somebody gets a hold of it. Through all those things, we get a hold of it. And how do they internalize it? How do they really learn? And that's what gets you close to transfer. And the good news is, as KMers, that whole internalization, we've tried to be on top of that, right? We've tried to look at the various ways that people internalize, whether it's with our learning partners through training, again, mentoring, job rotations, being able to present that what you've learned, put it in the same context, different context. That's that internalization, and it's cyclical. It's cycle. It has to go around and around for people to really absorb, so it spits back out as part of that tacit to tacit transfer when you learn something. And so I just want to encourage you to start looking at the steps first and thinking about how transfer happens, and then start building it in, and your approaches then become very clear, and meaningful. And my KMers out there, don't throw out everything. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You got great systems. Just capitalize those. And it's like I say, the last sentence, be very intentional about what you've done. So Lynda, I could talk about this for one full day. If you'll come join me in certification, you can really bake into it and do activities too. But that should give you a notion of saying, this is happening. How do we get our hands around it? Oh yeah. And then how do we enable it with technology? We'll talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. And,
Yeah.
we have a lot of great content in the resource library around this particular topic that breaks each one down one step. So if you're struggling with one particular area, right, dig into it.
Absolutely. And then why are we doing this, guys? There's just so many benefits. We're going to talk a little bit later about expert knowledge. I mean, there's a lot. Shifts are happening. Shifts with an F. Shifts are happening. We're all shifting, whether it's efficiency shifts, as Lynda said, the pace, it's just the overwhelming pace of change. And we all seem to be worried these days about knowledge leaving, whether it's walking out, being pushed out. We're worried about it leaving. It's still on that top 3. And so link it to what is important now. Do you need to get people up to speed because you're doing more with less? Do you have a lot of risk associated with expert knowledge walking out the door and you have no bench strength to pick that up and make sure when plants go into an emergency shutdown, you can be there to make sure you respond accordingly and you don't have a disaster on your hands. So there's so many, again, services to clients, expanding what we know about our client and our solutions so they can do that. There's just a lot of benefits. And if you can start linking that conversation of why you want to do it to what impact it's going to have, you have a really strong business case.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Lynda.
Yeah. And
yeah, we want to know, right?
Yeah, we want to know now. We're gonna that was just our little introduction of really why we're focusing on, or why we believe you should prioritize knowledge transfer. So tell us what's happening in your organization today. How focused is your organization currently on the transfer of critical knowledge? And these are very basic, right? Is it a high priority everywhere? Is it just within a division? Is it only somewhat? Is it just the KM team talking about it and it hasn't reached the masses yet? Or maybe it's not a priority. Yeah.
Lynda, Darcy and I are seeing a lot of this, and it does start out with knowledge management sees it, and it's because, and I'd let you guys please chat us up in here and tell us what you're seeing, because it is with people leaving. That tends to start that conversation, and KM recognizes it right away, but it's becoming a lot of other things too that aren't necessarily knowledge management centric. There's a lot of business reasons people are focusing on this right now.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to know what it is.
Now, you can all see the poll. Hopefully, I know a couple of people have put some answers in the chat, but hopefully there's a poll that's popped up. I can see it on my screen.
Yeah, I know it. And I'm seeing Paul. Okay. Paul, thank you. D is only a priority. Yeah, not a priority at all. I know. So I'm going to challenge you guys saying, how do you make it everyone's priority? Because it's their knowledge. Yeah. It's our business knowledge to get our missions done. Absolutely. Objectives done. I'm dying to see what people say. Yeah, Cynthia, thank you. Client impact when systems fail.
Wow, we're kind of all over, aren't we, a little bit?
Oh, we have a mixed group today.
We do. It's good to see that it's the not a priority is so low. That makes me happy. And we're kind of mixed around there. It's a high priority in some specific divisions. That doesn't surprise me. Somewhat of a priority, and only a priority for the KM team, which makes it challenging. So those of you where it's only a priority for that KM team specifically, the roundtable we have in a couple weeks, right? If you're a member of APQC, come and join us. Let's talk more about how we get that concept right outside and that understanding outside the KM team.
Yeah. Some good chats. It does happen when retirement is announced. We do it too late. This true story. I just did a knowledge transfer of 1 hour last Thursday with someone who was leaving on Friday, and he has 35 years of experience. That doesn't cut it, guys. No, so it's a long-term thing, and it's always kind of that afterthought, but I'm thrilled to see, Lynda, because it is a big group, almost 40%.
It is
high priority. So I'm glad it is.
That's good.
And we can do this.
Just a little heads up, and I love all the comments because there are a lot of comments about retirement and even Cindy's example. We're actually going to dig deep into this topic for research this year, which we haven't done before, and we're going to focus specifically on the knowledge transfer of people who are retiring because we have a lot of companies saying we got a lot of baby boomers leaving our organization. We're going to dig a little deeper into just that specific knowledge transfer challenge as well, which I think will be exciting and fun. All right, so we're going to move on. We're going to talk about selecting the right approach, and we've got our the famous Darcy Lemons here, who leads a lot of our knowledge transfer certification course, and so she's going to give you just some little tidbits and previews about the kinds of things you might talk about if you were in certification. But these are so important for us to think about from knowledge transfer. So thanks, Darcy.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here and have an opportunity to talk with everybody. So yeah, Lynda asked me to talk about, what are some ways to think about and then select the right knowledge transfer approach, for your organizations, because we do get asked that a lot. What's the right approach to take? Well, first of all, they usually start off with what is knowledge transfer, and then, well, what's the right approach to take? And they want to know, about what does it look like? How do they look and feel? And, can you touch it, taste it, sense it, smell it, all of that? What resources do they require? How big or small are they? And, what I tend to say is that it can be really hard. It can be a hard decision to make. There's a lot of options out there. So it can be a hard decision to make as to what is the right approach that we need for any given situation or context. And I'll explain what I mean by that in just a moment. So we've pulled together a few things to help you make those decisions. And before we get into some of the more tactical things, I want to start kind of big picture. So looking at this image here, you can see there's this beautiful Venn diagram, and we've got something called the teachable moment stuck right there in the bullseye, the middle there. And think of the teachable moment as that's the moment when our knowledge user, an employee, an individual, or a group of individuals in our organization, they need knowledge, some kind of knowledge in order to do something, right? To make a decision, to solve a problem, innovate, complete a task, whatever it is that they're faced with at that time. Well, in order to ensure that they can find sending another step that's not explicitly on our knowledge flow process, but that they can find, access, and use the knowledge that's available to them. We need an environment that surrounds these individuals and teams and entire departments and functional areas that can help them find, access, and use that knowledge, or connect with another individual or group of individuals, potentially subject matter experts, who have that knowledge and can share or transfer over to those end users who need it. So looking at it from a big picture, we firmly believe that as the people in our organizations who are often responsible and sometimes even accountable for ensuring knowledge transfer is going on, as KM practitioners, knowledge transfer practitioners in our organization, we've got to reach out and work with our partners in our organizations, out in the business, so to speak. So we firmly believe there's opportunity here for knowledge management team, the knowledge transfer team to, Cindy mentioned a moment ago, those continuous improvement, process excellence, process and performance management groups, of whatever label they have in our organizations, right? Because they can help us build not only knowledge, but knowledge transfer activities into our business processes, our workflows, our methodologies, which makes it easier to find, access, and use, easier to digest, and easier to implement in that teachable moment when we have an immediate need. Learning is another great partner that we should be working with. After all, our learning folks can help us on the KM side of things to take the critical knowledge that needs to be transferred and create learning collateral around that. Design entire course curricula around it, depending on the breadth and depth of the knowledge and focus. They help support professional development. They can help incorporate knowledge transfer, knowledge sharing and transfer into career paths and ladders in our organization. And of course, there's our stakeholders as well, right? After all, as Cindy pointed out just a few minutes ago, it's their knowledge that's to be transferred. It's not our knowledge as the KM practitioners. It's those people out there in the business performing the work that keeps our organizations going, that keeps the lights on, that helps us meet our missions and achieve our visions in our organizations, right? So those stakeholders span the spectrum. It's everybody from a new hire fresh out of college, it's our mid-career employees, it's our experts, it's our leaders. All of them help create this and have a role to play in an environment that is conducive and enables knowledge transfer. And we need that environment if we want to ensure that our knowledge transfer is systematic, scalable, and sustainable. Again, when we were talking about the knowledge flow process, what we're really getting at is we're doing some intentional knowledge transfer. And we want to think about it from a life cycle perspective, because often this isn't something that is just one and done. It is something that needs to occur, on a I would say a regular basis in our organizations, and we can determine what that regular basis looks like. But we always have to be prepared to support and enable and rise to the occasion when we have an opportunity for knowledge transfer. So we have, assuming we have the right environment, then how do you select the right transfer approach? In over 2+ decades, coming up on almost 3 decades in knowledge management and knowledge transfer, we've identified dozens and dozens, probably more like hundreds and hundreds of knowledge transfer approaches. So over the years, we've attempted to organize them into 4 broad categories shown here: elicitation, documentation, peer-based, and learning. And elicitation refers to a series of processes and techniques that are used to help pull that tacit knowledge out of people's heads, right? That deep experiential knowledge. We pull it out of people's heads in a structured fashion through interviews with our subject matter experts, focus groups, after action reviews, job handoff documents. There's a variety of approaches that fall into that elicitation category. You may need peer-based approaches, which are, they refer to more interactive approaches and techniques, bringing people together, like our communities of practice that we have in our organization. Or perhaps there's some internal workshops, master classes, storytelling opportunities. Learning approaches. These are designed to help us optimize our coworkers, the employees in the organization, their skills and competencies, and include things like internal training courses, job shadowing, master classes, and of course, documentation, which is probably the surest and most straightforward way to preserve the knowledge in our organizations. But and you all, we have these lists of these approaches on our website, apqc.org. So we encourage you to go and search on knowledge transfer approaches. And there is so much in there that takes a deep dive into what these approaches are, resources, pros and cons, etc. But here, for the purpose of the webinar, so how do you decide? Do I need elicitation? Do we need peer-based? What about documentation? Oh my gosh, learning. How do we pick and choose? So we suggest you start with the knowledge itself. What knowledge is important enough or critical enough to transfer that we're willing to spend some resources, because it does take resources, time, people, etc., to do this knowledge transfer. So you might want to do some knowledge mapping or some kind of knowledge risk analysis, knowledge audit to help identify what that critical knowledge is that we need to transfer, and to help you identify then opportunities for transferring that knowledge. Consider then, once you know what the knowledge is and you have an idea of what the opportunities are, you can consider the variety of approaches and use some of the principles here to down select, right, to the right one. So the knowledge itself, is it rare? Is it unique? Can it be easily captured in documents or other explicit forms? The recipients or the end users of the knowledge, do we know who they are? If we do, then peer-based approaches might be the way to go. What about the stability of the knowledge? And what we mean by that is how rapidly is that body of knowledge, how rapidly is it evolving and changing and developing in the organization? So we've listed out some principles here that can help you make some decisions. And I will tell you, you probably, if you've ever attended one of our other another KM webinar that we've had, you've probably heard us say, you know, your organization needs a portfolio or a toolkit of KM approaches and techniques. Well, knowledge transfer is no different. It's very rare that one knowledge transfer approach fits all the situations and contexts in your organization. So you are going to end up, hopefully, ideally, with a portfolio or toolkit of knowledge transfer approaches that you can do some assessment and needs assessment with those end users and recipients of the knowledge, the sources, the SMEs, the leaders in our organization of knowledge who have the knowledge, to determine what approach is the right fit at that point in time. Now, in addition to environment and the approaches, the other key aspect that we wanted to bring up here is really understanding the culture of the organization. And in our experience, we've often seen where people try to change the culture of the organization without truly understanding it or without taking it into consideration. Oftentimes because we're being pushed, right? Move fast, fast, fast. But we have to understand and consider what are the core values of the organization, you know, the vision, the mission, those core behaviors and values that have been in place probably for decades. Understanding the entrenched ideas about how things get done around here. Well, this is just the way we work, right? And then the various perspectives that the people, the employees of the organization bring into it. After all, we've got people in so many different roles and jobs across the organization. They bring their experiences in. They represent different generations. They're also in different physical, geographical locations. And all of this can and does impact and influence the culture of the organization. And, you know, sometimes because we're moving so fast and we don't take that into consideration, we can make some mistakes, right? Some of the more common ones, you know, we fail to align with the importance, the needs of the organization. What's the value proposition for knowledge transfer in the organization? How does it support and enable people to do their work and to do their work in such a way that we are marching towards accomplishing those outcomes and outputs, work outcomes and outputs that are so important to our organizations. Too often also we treat it as a one and done and we set it and forget it. We don't, we assume that we can get it all done, knowledge transfer in one, you know, one fell swoop, one opportunity, where sometimes it takes a little bit longer and we're not willing to give it that time. We don't always collect feedback and get input from the masses, the people involved, both the sources of our knowledge and the recipients of the knowledge, to understand how we can improve our knowledge transfer efforts in the organization. And oftentimes, I think we underestimate how much time it's going to take and the degree of difficulty that is involved in this. People need learning cycles. We need an opportunity as humans to absorb that knowledge and have a chance to practice it, put it to work, right? And internalize it, apply it in our work, and make it ours, right? And we don't always, we sometimes short cycle those learning cycles. You know, if you think about it, a new hire that has come to the organization, maybe they've been with us for a few weeks or a couple of months, but this new hire fresh out of college, connecting them with an SME is, we're not going to say that, we would never say that's a bad thing, right? They do need to know who the SMEs are in the organization and develop and build those relationships. But, you know, a new hire fresh out of college doesn't have the context, the work experience to take advantage of all the knowledge that an SME could transfer, share with them, and put it into practice. They simply don't have the practical experience to do that. So we, again, we underestimate sometimes that the degree of difficulty in transferring that knowledge in terms of people being able to apply it. The last section here, I want to leave you with the predictors in this section of today's session, some predictors of successful and sustainable transfer. And there's a lot. We've identified 4 key predictors here that we wanted to share with you today. And I alluded to the first one, the motivation of the source and the recipient, and what is bringing them to the table. Is this for the source of the knowledge? Is this an intrinsic thing that it's the right thing to do? I want to share my knowledge. Or, is there a pain, a business need being felt? Maybe they're not able to work effectively because the people around them who they work with don't have all the knowledge they need. So it's slowing everything down, right? And the recipients of the knowledge, understanding the motivation to get involved, to want to be a part of those conversations and those knowledge transfer activities. But oftentimes we hit absorptive capacity. We're all busy. We're working at 100+% capacity. And so you can hit that barrier of absorbed capacity, and we need to be aware of that. The quality of the relationship between our sources and recipients, the trust that needs to be there. Our recipients, they need to trust the knowledge. They need to trust the people that they're acquiring the knowledge from, or the processes, the documents, etc. And knowledge management can help facilitate those relationships and help develop them, support them, encourage them, nurture them in our organizations. Understanding the work, that a large portion of the knowledge to be transferred is tacit. And if you've ever seen the iceberg image that we have used for, I think, 2+ decades now, in a variety of forms, but the majority of the iceberg is under the water, and that represents our tacit knowledge in our organizations. The majority of the knowledge in our organizations, just like the iceberg being underwater, it's in our heads, right? And so in order to share that knowledge, we've got to get it out of our heads, but we also have to ensure that the people receiving the knowledge understand the work to be done. Going back to the new hire and the SME example, sometimes the new hire just doesn't have the context to be able to truly understand the knowledge and be able to apply it. And then we need to provide facilitation and support. Our transfer attempts will falter, if not just outright fail, unless the people attempting to share the knowledge, best practices, etc., receive some form of support from KM, from the continuous improvement groups, from learning, from leadership. Oftentimes this takes the form of, can be providing that facilitation. It can be helping with the documentation of the knowledge if we're capturing and documenting it. It can be in the form of recognition and reward for people who are contributing and using the knowledge, and visible leadership support always is a key factor for successful and sustainable transfer. So some food for thought for you all as we move into this next section and talk about some proven practices. And I'm going to hand it back to Lynda and Cindy.
Awesome. Darcy, that was so good. I just love the digging into the predictors as well. It always makes you really think deeply. And we've had some great comments in there talking about knowledge transfer and getting it into the employee life cycle. So I loved that question popped up before we even mentioned it. So that's good. Everyone's thinking about it. So we're going to close the webinar today in the last section, talking about some proven practices, how to get started, how to move forward. But before we share some things with you, we wanted to hear from you. And you've already given us some good examples in the chat already of some of the things you're doing. But if you can just pop in the chat, this one's not a poll, but just put in the chat, and Lauren Hayes put the question in there for you. To share one proven practice for knowledge transfer within your organization that you might be doing right now. Maybe it's not perfect. Yeah, there you go. Exit interviews. Thank you, Michelle. She got one right in there right away. It's like, yeah, that's amazing. Using agents. Oh my gosh, look at that.
People I know. And Lynda, Paul said earlier, functional desk guides. Paul, yes. I love that. I'm familiar with those where you've captured what the roles are, what the key attributes of that are, and you really dig into those knowledges. Is anybody using knowledge maps? I'm curious. Are those helping you? Yeah, I love the retrospectives. Thank
I
you.
like the site visit program. What an amazing
Mhm.
thing. That's amazing. Go visit, go on a field trip, right? Go visit another site and see how they're doing things.
Oh, good. The
Yeah,
QMS, thank you, Ronald. We
love that,
forget
Ronald.
about that, how
I
important that is.
I love the tie of the quality management system to knowledge management. It makes so much sense. I'd love to hear more about that. That
She's
would be
got a
amazing.
background in that. Don't let her
Yeah,
fool you.
I love it.
Yeah,
I know,
thank
I
you.
love it. I get all geeked out about knowledge or quality stuff. So that's
I'm so
something
glad
I
somebody
enjoy.
brought up storytelling.
Yes,
Yay.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love
And
storytelling.
you know, Linda and Darcy, we've talked a lot about continuum, guys. I love all of this. I'm going to do a shout out to our Navy friends, Carrier Team One. One of the things that I really love that they do a lot of the things you're talking about, all the way from after action reviews to lessons learned through one of their projects, very focused on their availabilities and getting ready to do the maintenance on our carriers. And when that's all said and done, they capture along the way, they use it along the way. And then when everything's done with that project, they bring everybody together, right? It's expensive to bring all that knowledge together, but to make sure that they really are crystallizing and people are learning, they call it a hot wash.
I love
And
that.
so it's bringing people together. It could be a day, 2 days. They've gotten really efficient with it. Could be virtual, what have you. But it's really that baking in, and it's those cycles of learning that they have built into that whole process.
I love it. Ask me anything sessions. Those are great too. My
Here to
role
here.
portfolios. I'd love to hear more about that. Melissa, I think, wrote that. My role portfolios. So that must be like a personal portfolio that people
I
have.
know. And Kayla, you're going to get me Pecha Kucha. I don't know if I'm saying that
Yep.
correctly. I will go look that up, or give us a short.
Yeah, the design sharing
explanation.
events, those are amazing.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant. Love it. Oh, thanks. Thanks for putting all those. Let's keep putting those examples in while we continue if you want to, because these are just fantastic, and these will be shared along with our summary write-up that we do, but they will be anonymized, right? Your name won't be attached to it, but the ideas will be shared so everybody can kind of see those. So thank you so much. Yeah. Oh, look at that. A my role portfolio template to document what we do in our job so we can, that's
Nice.
amazing. I love that. These are great. Okay. That's why I'm
Very
excited for the
nice.
roundtable, because we're going to dig deeper into those things when we have the roundtable in a couple weeks. So hopefully some of y'all can come back to that. So go ahead, Cindy. You're going to talk a little bit about some of the proven practices getting started by talking about the end user and knowing who they are.
Well, a spoiler alert, excuse me, I put this in chat just a minute ago. What I think this really says it all, and I don't have to spend a lot of time on this, guys, you get it. But our data shows that we as organizations tend to spend a lot of time in that new hire to learners, regardless of the new hire, if you're hiring expertise or it's somebody just fresh out of, school. But we spend a lot of time in there, and then we kind of don't anymore. That's what our data shows with our research that we've done. And we think some of the biggest opportunities are there in the middle, where those learners become contributors. They're still learners. You should always, our founder, Jack Grayson, said, always set yourself up as a learner. You get by easier in life. And he's right. So you're a constant learner, but you can do more and more contribution. It's on your way to being an expert, from that nexpert to an expert, to finally the retiree piece. So the bookends are kind of classic, and you see those, but I think from a learning, a continuous improvement with processes and knowledge flow perspective, there's a lot of opportunities in those centerpieces to really look at how knowledge gets used. And if it's not, how do you make it a little bit more of that continuous cycle built around some of those roles? So it just gives you a new perspective. It's the people in your organization. I would probably put myself, I'm not a new hire, certainly, and I'm not a retiree yet. So I'm constantly like to look at myself in that whole cycle, right?
Yep.
And when you get people to set themselves up at that, you get a chance of getting your people really involved in this, and them being part of the process. Engagement is everything.
And one thing before we move to the next slide, Cindy, is that what we normally find, and I'm sure everyone can resonate, is where do we focus? New hires and retirees, right? That's why that middle section that we just talked about is so important. So
Yeah.
hopefully we dig into that in our roundtable too and get to the heart of some of what people are doing in that middle section.
Yeah. And then Lynda, I just love this. I'll segue for you. Put knowledge where people trip over. That was said by our chairman, Dr. Carla O'Dell, years ago. And so this is just very practical, right? This is where you need that partnership with your learning partners, with your continuous improvement partners, so you can build it into those methodologies of business, the way we execute work every day, and then into the roles and expectations. And you guys have done a great job of talking, giving me even more ideas about how to build that into role, pointing it out in career development, and then just dialogue. We need more and more of that. We have the capabilities. We don't have to be behind email all day long.
I know. Such a powerful, put it where people trip over it, in the flow, in the life cycle, all of the things, right? It's an amazing concept. And it's hard. It's really hard. And so we're talking about the user. We're talking about putting it into people's processes and daily work. We also have to talk about the technology that it might take, right? To support knowledge transfer, all those different approaches to knowledge transfer that Darcy talked about. Almost every one of them can have a technology to help leverage it as well, right? So think about those. And this is from our latest benchmarking research we just did. It just came out 2 months ago. These are the most common knowledge management technologies and applications that people are using in today's organizations. And you're probably using one, all, some of these technologies. The reason we mention it is think about what you have in place. If you want to put knowledge where people trip over it, use the technologies that they're used to, right? Leverage those things that your culture has already embraced. Everybody uses Microsoft Teams and they use them for communities and they use them for your knowledge transfer activities as well. Don't make them think about yet another technology, right? Use what you already have and leverage what works in your culture within your organization. And, as things like AI and generative AI continue to advance, that might get a little bit higher in your organization. But if you're not using that yet, that's okay too, right? So use what is being leveraged within your organization. And for most, as you can see from here, it's about that collaboration and digital workplace platform that we have in place and those document management systems, intranet platforms, right? Everyone's using those in some way, shape, or form. How does that help you in your knowledge transfer challenge as well? So technology is always going to be there. Think about how you can leverage it in the most effective way. And then think about those experts, right? Isn't that why we do what we do in knowledge management, is because we think about our experts. They are our champions, our advocates. They're the reason we do what we do, because we want to preserve that expertise in our organization for future generations to come. We want to ensure that it's transferred and captured effectively. And the capturing piece tends to be a challenge. Some of the things we can do is to really focus on the role of the expert. What is it we need them to do to be effective at knowledge transfer? And these are some of the things that we've started to think about to bring the whole puzzle together for knowledge management. Are we getting the most that we can out of our experts? They may not know how to do all of these things intuitively. So we're there to help teach them. We're there to help draw on their strengths, right? And help augment maybe some of the areas they're not as good at. But we need them to be able to build relationships, right? It's about building a relationship. Remember when we talked about effective knowledge transfer takes a good quality relationship. It takes trust for that to happen. We need them to be able to entertain and inspire the next person that they're talking to. That mentee or that learner needs to be inspired by what they're saying. Entertain them with the stories, their experience through stories. And also tie it back to the business. We don't do this just for the sake of doing it. We do it because we're trying to improve the bottom line of our business and add value, right? Helping to evolve cultures is something that experts do for us as well. They're the ones setting the stage. They're the ones helping us move to that next level. And when we're trying to get people to understand that how important knowledge transfer is, they can help us with that by being the example, right? By showing up and helping to be a part of that process and playing that role of an expert and being the example, because they're teaching the experts and the new hires what it looks like to be an expert in the organization. So convey that wisdom overall. We need those experts to be a part of this, to convey wisdom. And it's all about the tacit piece. It's about being able to capture through all those different methods of knowledge transfer. It's also about the technology that we have now, right? Our experts who are getting ready to leave, how do we get them involved in harnessing AI for, again, for our future workforce? We need those experts because they're the ones that know, and Cindy always says this, you don't know what you know until somebody asks you, right? So let's start asking those questions. What is it we need to know from our experts? And how then can we leverage them to train the machines, train those models that we need to leverage AI more effectively? We in the KM team can help, and the IT teams can help get technology set up. We can help by understanding how to prompt write, do those kinds of things. But we need our experts to help really train the machines. We need them to evaluate the outputs that are coming out. Are these valid? Are they 80% valid? Are they 50% valid? Are they 100% valid? What do those look like? How do we get our experts involved in the AI process? Because they will help enrich the content. It will help us move quicker to that seeing value in leveraging something like AI. And it also improves our ability to think more innovatively, right? If we have more information available to us from our experts, we can move quicker through the process of becoming up to speed and becoming an expert ourselves, right? That cycle that Cindy talked about in the middle, from learner to expert to teaching others, right, before we leave. So it's really just important to think about that role of the expert and what that looks like and how are we helping them through this process. And how do we do that? We have to have some effective change management. I know we talk about it almost in every webinar, everything we do, and I'm not going into details of this necessarily today, but it is important to think about how change is managed in your organization. Because when we talk about knowledge transfer, we're asking people to do something perhaps differently than what they're used to. We're asking experts to open up about what they know. We're asking new people and people mid-career and experts to open up about what they don't know and be open to listening and learning new ways of doing things. And if your organization culturally is not managing change very effectively, it's probably something that you need to think about as part of your overall knowledge management program. But specifically for knowledge transfer, think about how it's managed today. What are the structure and the resources that are in place for managing change today? How can you leverage that in your efforts for knowledge transfer? How supportive are leaders? How much buy-in do you have for transferring knowledge? We saw the poll earlier that said, for some, it's not a priority. How do we build that priority? How do we get that to the leadership? How do you communicate then and train the experts and the employees in the organization that this is going to be now part of your employee life cycle, right? We need it throughout, from new hire to mid-career to retiree. It's going to be something that we need to do. So we have to continually communicate and train and make it a part of our everyday work. Engaging people, they have to feel emotionally connected to this. They have to understand why it's important, and it has to be important to them personally too. This helps me leave a legacy. This helps me pass on something to someone else. This helps me learn something new. Just because I'm the expert doesn't mean I'm not going to learn from that new hire. They might be teaching something in school today that I haven't had the ability to learn yet, right? So it's a little bit of a back and forth, and that's how we engage people, is really getting people to understand that emotional connection to why it's important. And rewards and recognition. This is, somebody put in a question that said, love to hear examples of rewards that others are using. Yeah, people, throw them in the chat if you've got them. You know, the best examples of rewards and recognition are typically when it's become part of your job and it's actually something that you're measured on as well. If knowledge transfer is part of the employee lifecycle, it probably should be part of your performance process as well. Are you doing what you need to as an expert to help give back to the future of this organization? That's one area. KM teams put rewards in place, right, for things like knowledge transfer. Company that I used to work for, in order to win the highest level of award in the organization, technical award in the organization, those people had to be involved in a community of practice and show up and transfer and teach as part of their the criteria for even winning an award, right? So there's things you can build in. There's things, somebody put in a kudos board. There's a thank you note from that person who just learned from an expert in the organization. Cindy Hubert, thank you for spending an hour of time with me and sharing with me your experiences in knowledge management within your career. That says a lot to people, right? You know, so Cindy, I was using it as an example, but it's absolutely true, right? You know, so There's so many things. And also, I will say one last thing about rewards, and that is build it into current recognition systems you already have in the organization. If you already have those kudos boards, or you have ways of giving little gifts to people through the internet, little gift cards, things like that, use what's already there that people are used to as well. Create your own. I've seen traveling awards. We used to have traveling awards in my organization that were peer to peer, that we gave to somebody else, right, for doing a great thing. In this case, it was related to quality, but same thing, right? Make it something that's fun and transferable. So, okay,
Yes.
get super excited talking about this stuff, but we have one more
Yes,
area.
we do.
Got to think
I
about
know.
measures.
And then she says, yeah, measurement I can talk about for 2 days too. Hey,
Yeah.
guys, I want to just do a quick example, and I promise I'll hit measurement. But knowledge transfer has been going on in our chat. And here's the good news. So most of us are on that same wavelength. We're knowledge managers, we're continuous improvement people, whatever we are, but we have the same lingo. We look at it sort of through the same lens. And when you all probe and say, tell me a little bit more about those functional desk guides or something, that's transfer happening, guys. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes it happens really fluidly. If you don't get it, that's because you're not a KMer, or you're just getting into it and you're going, what is this language they're speaking? And so going back to Lynda's common definitions, I think that's one of the things that really helps us get all on the same page to have the same context going forward. So yeah, we can't talk about this without a little 1 minute of measurement. We're looking for what is the impact, and I think you have to look at this through a variety of ways. Transfer is also about adoption and participation. How do I get people engaged? It's their knowledge, it's who you're trying to transfer. Me sitting doing an elicitation of a 40-year plant manager, I can handle it, I can capture, I can ask questions, I learn a whole lot. What am I going to do? I'm not going to be around to do the emergency plant bringing it back up after it's shut down. So yeah, I was just part of this, guys. You can tell it's top of mind, but I'm just saying, so you got to have the right people there listening. That's part of it. And that's a measurement piece. Who's there? Do we have the right people? Efficiency and quality tend to be another part of your balanced scorecard. These are all around performance. How do we have that built into when it's transferred? Does it make it easier, better, faster? How do you then look at accelerating learning? That's part of that satisfaction. If I can develop my career, accelerate my learning to do that, do something better, faster, right away, it's going to make a big difference for me. And of course, then just giving that visibility that Lynda talked about earlier in terms of the training, the rewards and recognition, but it's a way to demonstrate your learning. And guys, I'm going to tell you, there's a crossover right now. I just picked up on it about a week ago. I've been hearing all my learning partners talk about micro learning and micro learning assets. KM is all over that with you. We understand and probably have some good capabilities that can help you do that, and vice versa. So Lynda, I think you need the fourth pillar of the balanced scorecard is for value. Are we achieving
Yes.
our mission? Are we showing return on investment and value? And it's linking that activity to the outputs of the business process that lead us to that. It's the knowledge formula, and knowledge intensive measures are really important to help get us through here. They're what's needed.
I love that. And I love the linking to the business value and the process, like you said, but I think it's also linking to, the core competency of the organization, right? If you're a design engineering organization, are we continuing to keep that core competency built and developed over time? Yes, it adds the value, but it's about that competency path as well. I mean, I love all of this. And I put a note in the chat for y'all that there's a lot of measures in our resource library, so please go check them out. I put some of them at the end of this webinar. And because we like to answer questions throughout and chat throughout this webinar, we don't typically have time at the end to do more, but please continue to throw some things in the chat. I'll leave it open here for a couple more minutes if you have something else to add, but we want to thank you so much for your time today. Such a great conversation. And again, if you're a member of APQC and you want to be a part of our roundtable and continue this conversation and go a little bit deeper and hear more examples from other members, In 2 weeks' time, we're going to do this. We're going to do this again, and it's a little bit more interactive where you have a chance to talk and put your answers in the chat and things like that. So, but we thank you so much for joining us. And for those that will listen to the webinar, we'd love to hear feedback on this as well, if you happen to read this online. So thank you so much. Go out, make it a great day, and we will talk to you again soon. And hopefully we see some of you in Houston in 4 weeks.
Yes. Thanks, Lynda. Thanks, everyone. Bye, Darcy.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.